The shadow in the gym. Sometimes, the biggest threat isn't the person trying to break in, but the one who has been hiding in plain sight. For a group of middle schoolers stuck in the gymnasium during a surprise lockdown, they quickly learned that the safest place in the school had become a silent cage with no way out. It was the final period on a Friday, and the air in the gymnasium was thick with the smell of floor wax and the squeak of sneakers. My PE class was in the middle of a heated dodgeball tournament, the kind where the only thing that matters is not getting hit by a stray red ball. The massive space was echoing with shouts and laughter, making it almost impossible to hear anything else. Then, the laughter stopped abruptly as the emergency sirens began to wail, a high-pitched, oscillating scream that signaled a Level 1 lockdown. Our coach, Mr. Henderson, immediately blew his whistle, his face turning a ghostly shade of pale. "Bleachers, now, get under the bottom tier," he barked, pointing toward the heavy motorized seating units that were currently retracted against the wall. We scrambled like a panicked herd, sliding into the dark, dusty gap between the floor and the underside of the heavy wooden benches. As we huddled together, trying to remain silent, the overhead lights flickered once and then died, leaving the gym in a terrifying, hollow silence. I was pressed against the cold metal support beam, looking out through the narrow slats toward the center of the court. That's when I saw it. A single, dark figure, standing perfectly still under the basketball hoop, holding a long, thin object that caught a glint of the emergency exit light. Why wasn't Mr. Henderson saying anything to them? The silence in the gymnasium was heavy, broken only by the sound of 25 kids trying to breathe as quietly as possible. From my vantage point under the bleachers, the gym floor looked like a vast, empty ocean of polished wood. The figure under the hoop didn't move for several minutes. They stood like a statue, watching the shadows. I looked over at Mr. Henderson, who was crouched at the edge of our group. His eyes were fixed on the figure, and he was gripping his whistle so hard his knuckles were white. He didn't move to help us. He didn't even whisper a reassurance. He just stared, frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. The figure finally began to move. It wasn't a run or a cautious creep. It was a slow, agonizingly deliberate walk. The sound of their boots hitting the hardwood was like a hammer on an anvil. Clack, clack, clack. They weren't heading for the exits. They were walking in a slow circle around the perimeter of the gym, tracing the very walls where we were hiding. Every time the footsteps passed our section of the bleachers, I felt a vibration through the floorboards that seemed to rattle my very teeth. As the intruder reached the far side of the gym, where the equipment room was located, they stopped. We heard the metallic jingle of keys, not the janitor's heavy ring, but a small, delicate set. Then, the sound of a heavy padlock being snapped open. The intruder stepped inside the equipment room and began to move things. We heard the hollow thud of medicine balls hitting the floor and the clatter of metal bats being tossed aside. It felt like they were looking for something specific, a tool or a weapon that they knew was kept there. One of the girls near me started to let out a whimpering sob. I reached out and squeezed her hand, my own palm slick with sweat. The sound was tiny, a mere mouse click in the vastness of the gym. But the footsteps in the equipment room stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was the silence of a predator that had finally caught the scent of its prey. The intruder emerged from the equipment room. In the dim red glow of the emergency exit sign, I could see they were now carrying a heavy, long-handled bolt cutter. They began to walk directly toward our section of the bleachers. This wasn't a search anymore. It was an approach. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I watched their boots, black, scuffed, and strangely familiar, stop just 3 feet away from where I lay. Then the intruder did something that turned my blood to ice. They knelt down. I could see the fabric of their dark trousers stretching over their knees. They leaned their head down, pressing their face against the gap in the bleachers, trying to peer into the darkness where we were hiding. I held my breath until my vision began to blur, praying that the shadows were deep enough to keep us invisible. For a long, terrifying minute, we were face to face with a nightmare, separated only by a few inches of wood and metal. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the gymnasium were kicked open. "Police, stay where you are." The gym was suddenly flooded with the harsh blue and red strobes of tactical flashlights. The intruder didn't run. They didn't fight. They simply stood up and dropped the bolt cutters, raising their hands with a slow, chilling calmness. As the officers swarmed the floor and tackled the figure, Mr. Henderson finally moved. He didn't go to the police. He slumped against the wall, burying his face in his hands. It wasn't until the lights were turned back on and we were being ushered out of the gym that we saw the intruder's face. It was the school's star athlete, a senior who had graduated the year before and had been a favorite of the coaching staff. In his backpack, police found a collection of zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a notebook filled with the names of every student in our specific PE class. He hadn't been scoping the school. He had been stalking our schedule for months. The most disturbing part was that he had used a key to get into the building, a key that had been reported missing from the coach's office 2 weeks prior. The gym still feels different now. The echoes don't sound like games anymore. They sound like footsteps. And every time I hear the jingle of keys in the hallway, I find myself looking for the nearest place to hide.